So, what is disrupting fertility in cattle? These are some studies that were done some time ago from a group, several different publications. Normal animals got pregnant to an insemination on average about 82 days after calving. But with these different clinical conditions, it took longer to get the animals in calf. So there's low body condition score, took an extra 8 days. Milk fever took longer. Mastitis, by now we're looking at nearly 12 days extra. Dystocia, retained membranes, endometritis. Caesarean took a really long time, but then we have got the problem here that the farmer sometimes doesn't inseminate the animals because it seems a bit unfair to inseminate an animal too soon that's had a caesarean. But let's just look at, the clinical conditions highlighted in red all affect uterine activity. So they're fair enough again that there should be less fertile. But what about something wrong with the mammary gland, increasing conception, and lameness? Something wrong with your feet, affecting what's going on in the uterus? I think we have to concentrate on reducing the incidence of all these conditions. Just think of all the money and effort that's gone on and looking at the research and the farm plans and what have you to reduce mastitis and lameness. All that money and veterinary attention. And I would be quite keen that instead of putting hands up pregnant cows to confirm they are pregnant, much more attention is taken by veterinary surgeons to deal with these clinical cases. So why doesn't the cow show heat? Got a headache. Not just that. Cows with problems don't want to get pregnant right now. It's not in their best interest to get pregnant, but they may want to later, so they reserve the right to get pregnant on a future opportunity. So let's now talk about pregnancy and PAGs and think about how pregnancy is established. Basically, cells from a live, and I emphasize a live fetus, those cells make and transfer pregnancy-associated glycoproteins, PAGs, to the lining of the dam's uterus. But I just want to remind you, you know already really, that there are pregnancy losses, especially early on in a pregnancy. And they're high because there's after calving, because there's a very slow decline in concentrations occurring in the days after calving. So it takes about 30 days for the values to get below into the negative values for PAG. So the suggestion is that you don't test animals before 60 days post-calving. You may say, why 60 days? But of course, you've got to inseminate the animals in this period till you get to day 28 later. If we now look at what happens with a pregnant cow, the scale now is much larger, so this is a much shorter length of time here. And we can see that the PAG increases in a pregnant cow, and it's best to not start sampling until after day 28. A farmer rang me last week saying the way he uses PAG, and he's been doing it for 3 or 4 years now, he arranges a vet visit a couple of days after the milk recording day, so that he's got the results of those animals that are pregnant. So the farmer does not need to think about those any longer. And the vet can then deal with the non-pregnant cows to do something about them as soon as possible. The accuracy at these different times in pregnancy for PAG is very high, as is the accuracy for ultrasound. But remember, I talked to you about pregnancy losses that take place. For example, if embryonic death takes place around day 35, the concentrations of PAG decrease very quickly. And that's because I was emphasizing to you before that you have to have a live embryo for the PAG to be transferred to the maternal system. So it takes about 8 to 10 days to give a negative result. So to minimize, there's a large number of those animals, remember, to minimize the economic effect of early embryo death, I'm suggesting that 2 samples of PAG are taken at a 30 to 60 day interval at the next milk recording to be absolutely certain that animal is pregnant. Obviously, if it's not pregnant and the values are down here, then you don't have to take the second sample. So to conclude, keep high heat detection top priority. Find the 75% of those that do express the heat and get them inseminated. Keep the production diseases to a minimum to avoid having 25% of those cows that have a headache and they're not actually expressing the heat. And I urge everybody involved to use all the available resources. The farmers should be speaking with the vet and the nutritionist and a geneticist. If you can get them all in the same room at the same time, that's fantastic, to produce a healthy herd. But farmer and vet and use of PAG tests can assess pregnancies efficiently.
So dairy farmers are no different to any other business in the sense that you've got inputs and you've got outputs. So your main output on a dairy farm obviously is milk. That's the main thing you're selling. And then the costs come from feed, from labor and fixed costs, feed being the big one, of course. And so it's important to maximize your output for the same amount of input, i.e. get more milk from the same input. And that is the important part of efficiency. Now, if when a cow has a calf, she produces milk at a nice, steady, high level without a decline over a period of time, then it's less important to get a cow and calf. But that isn't the reality. You'll see here, this is a graph showing days in milk, stage of lactation, versus milk yield. The green dots are first lactation cows and the orange ones are 2+ lactation cows. So you'll see that this is what a lactation curve does. It goes up high, peaking around about 60-70 days in milk, and then it will drop off. Heifers are a little bit flatter. They don't tend to drop quite so fast. But because cows drop off, it does mean that when they get what I'm going to call stale, so I'm saying beyond around 330 days in milk, then they become less profitable. And this graph shows this in a different way. So if we look at a lactation curve, milk yield going high, around about 50-60 days in milk, and then dropping off over a period of time. And we look at the dry matter intake. The dry matter intake will also go up a little bit, but it doesn't drop off to the same degree. So cows giving less milk at 300 days in milk are not eating significantly less than their counterparts earlier on in lactation. Now, applying some fag packet figures to the graph, you can see that the margin early lactation is nice and healthy. It might be costing you 10-11 pounds to feed that cow, but you're getting it might be costing you £4 a day to feed that cow, but you're getting 10 or 11 pounds worth of milk a day. So you got a healthy margin, £6.80. A bit later on, your margin drops, £4.10, and a bit further on again, it's costing a little bit less to feed those cows, £1.80 a day perhaps, but you're only getting £4 worth of milk a day. So much reduced margin. So you want as many cows as possible at that higher margin area. If we look at a graph, and these graphs are available through various different bits of software, of a typical herd and the spread of calving intervals, we'll see that you get a lot of cows, depending on the farm, that can have quite long calving intervals, say more than 480 days. And I'm calling these the problem cows. These are the cows that are problem in the sense that they're not as efficient economically as cows that are calving with a lower calving interval. Now, this is your target window in which hopefully all cows should fall. So from around 330-day calving interval to 480-day calving interval. The sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, because that's the most profitable cow, but it's impossible to get all cows calving with a 380, 390, 400-day calving interval. However, we can aim to get as many cows as possible, if not all, calving within that green frame. And we don't really want the ones calving outside that frame, whether they be too short intervals or too long intervals. So that all means, putting it together, that you have a service period of 50 days in milk, I'm suggesting, to 200 days in milk. And this is for an all year round calving herd. It's a tighter window than that for block calving herds. Voluntary waiting period being 0 to whenever you first start serving. So my service period, in order to get your 330 day to 480 day calving interval, is day 50 to day 200. And that's because the pregnancy is around about 280 days. So you just knock off 280 days from your calving interval. And what does that mean? Well, it means for those all year round calving herds, the service window is 50 days to 200 days in milk. And that's almost exactly a 5-month window or opportunity to get your individual cow in calf. And if you divide that by 3 weeks, because that's the typical length of a cycle, then that's just 7 service opportunities potentially to get your cow in calf. And it's important not to waste a single moment or opportunity in that 150-day block of time. Now, how can we do it? Well, maximizing heat expression is absolutely key. And there's lots of things that will come into that. For example, the facility design, the floor surface, having space is very important, but minimizing lameness. Go back to Hilary's slides, one of the slides at the beginning, which showed just how health events or poor health events will influence heat expression. And number 1 on that list was lameness. So lameness is something that is close to my heart. Those of you who know me as a farm vet will know that I've worked for many years on trying to improve lameness management on dairy farmers and help farmers do the same. And minimizing lameness is absolutely key to maximizing heat expression and therefore heat detection. How do you maximize heat detection, assuming the cows are showing it? Well, use technology. It just makes sense. It's an additive effect. So in other words, if you're using some technology such as a pedometer, for example, or some other activity meter, and you combine that with visual stockmanship and herdsmanship skills, then that will be more beneficial than using just one of those. So that's more beneficial than just using visual detection or just using technology. But maximizing heat detection through technology is a very, very sensible thing to do. And most farms that I know nowadays will be using some form of technology to help with that heat detection. Absolutely makes sense. And pregnancy test to find the empty cows. So you're not pregnancy testing to find the positive ones. You're really pregnancy testing to find the empty ones. You want to find those empty cows as soon as you possibly can in order to respond to them and try and get them served again. And use the best technologies again. Now, pregnancy testing is generally done through either ultrasound or rectal palpation or a combination of both. And it certainly has been done like that through my career. When I started out as a new graduate vet, ultrasound was really just starting out, and most of it was manual PD, and that's what I did in my first job. Was all manual pregnancy testing, testing from around about 6 weeks in calf. Quite accurate, not as accurate as ultrasound, and using ultrasound you can go a little bit lower. I love using ultrasound. I love to see that 30-day or 35-day conceptus. This is a picture of an ultrasound image of a pregnant cow, pregnant uterus horn, and here is that little 30-day conceptus. And I never tire from just seeing that tiny little dot and its little beating heart, which helps you know that all is well. But also you see the fluid associated with pregnancy, and that's an important sign as well. But the pregnancy testing, in order to be efficient and economic, it's got to be quick, it's got to be safe, it's got to be accurate, it's got to be efficient. Like I say, for my working lifetime, that has been through manual palpation And more recently, so in the last 20 years, has been predominantly ultrasound. There's some pictures there of some of my colleagues when I was in practice. And here we are, look like a bunch of Ghostbusters. Now, of course, there's probably more female vets, or there are certainly more female farm vets than there are male farm vets that are coming into the profession. Time moves on. There's an expression or a term that is commonly used within the veterinary world of rectal tourism, and that's how farm vets have traditionally spent a lot of their time. It has been the mainstay of the farm vet for many, many years, of doing rectal examinations either with or without ultrasound as part of routine, let's say fortnightly or monthly fertility visits for their dairy clients. And it's often the main link that actually vets have with their dairy clients. However, we need to move on. And I remember being at college 25 years ago and hearing from Hilary then that we needed to be aware of alternative technology that is bound to come down the line and not become dependent on this rectal tourism, as it's termed. There is now sample-based pregnancy testing as an alternative technology. It's been around for a little bit, and it is this is different to progesterone testing in milk. It is looking for the pregnancy-associated glycoprotein, as Hilary has expressed, and it has several potential advantages. It's less stressful for the cow and probably for the farmer. We don't know how much stress is induced with cows through rectal examination. The evidence is quite ambiguous, actually. So I don't take a particular strong view one way or the other, but I think it's something we need to be aware of, is that if we don't need necessarily to be putting our arms at the backside of cows on a regular basis, then we need to keep open eyes for alternatives. Certainly, it's accurate, it's efficient, very time efficient. It avoids cow segregation and lockups, which has to be better for the cow. And again, less stress and hassle for the farmer. And key, it is less dependent on a highly skilled veterinary resource. This rectal tourism doesn't have to take up a lot of our time. And I just question whether it is the most efficient use of our veterinary time. So in summary, fertility management, it is a fundamental part of dairy farm profitability, and that milk, that lactation curve, and the economic effects. Hopefully, I've expressed quite well. Heat detection and finding the non-pregnant cows as soon as you can after service is a cornerstone to that good fertility management. And again, hopefully, I've demonstrated the reason why that's the case. Pregnancy testing, therefore, is and will remain important. And just like we embrace new technologies for other things on dairy farms, then we must look to new technologies, embrace them where they're appropriate, and opportunities that will help the most forwards-looking vet practices and their clients to prosper. And I think that keeping our options open for a greater use of PAG is an example of just that.